Let's talk a little bit about debugging. Let's start with some terminology. A failure is inaccurate behavior of the code due to some defect in the code. So that's something that you can observe. For example, you're trying to register for a class on your phone with Access Stout. You try to pinch in and see it bigger, and then it actually cuts off part of the screen, the canvas. That's a failure that's happening that you're observing. Now, we try to identify those failures by testing our code. So when we write a program, we'll do a series of tests to see that it works correctly. When we haven't found those failures, or if we haven't fixed those failures, that means that there is a defect or a bug in the code. So that defect is the mistake that's in the code. You were trying to program something and you did it incorrectly. There's some mistake there. Or maybe it wasn't that you made a mistake in the programming part, but maybe you made a mistake in understanding how the program should work, and you programmed it the way you thought it should work, but it is not the way it was supposed to work, and so therefore that would also be a defect. And we like to call those bugs. Debugging is the process of finding that mistake or misunderstanding that was programmed into the code so that you can fix it. You've had to do some debugging already, I'm sure. It is very unusual for anyone's first run of their code for everything to work perfectly. So you have to go through that code and find out why the failure occurred and find where the defect is, the mistake is in your code. Now, you yourself have probably observed failures in code. I've talked about the ones I've seen in Access Stout. You may have thought it was your own user error. As a software engineer, I can confidently tell you that defects or bugs exist in all complex software. In order to try to eliminate the bugs or remove the most critical ones, we do a process of testing where we check if the code works correctly. That helps us find those failures. In some of your assignments, I gave you different test cases so that you can make sure your code works correctly. For example, when we were doing the age boundaries, I gave you different ages to test because different things happen based on different ages. And those were the test cases that I gave you so that you could check your code. After you identify failures through your testing, you want to do debugging so that you can identify where that defect is in your code so that you can fix it. There are a few different debugging techniques, and it depends upon where you're writing the code, what techniques you can use. On Khan Academy, the first technique you can use is to isolate the problem with comments. Comments are non-executable statements in your code. Remember, you can put a // or a /* closing with a */, and that makes it so anything within that syntax will not be executed. So you could comment out large portions of your code so that you can just test smaller parts, and then slowly add in more code executing until you find the part that is actually breaking your code. This helps you isolate which statement is causing the failure, and then you will be able to find the defect in the statement more easily if you find the exact line of code that the problem is occurring. Another way to debug is to use print line functions in Khan Academy. Print line can be added into your Khan Academy code, and that will print out whatever you put in the parentheses into the bottom of the canvas in Khan Academy. So you can print out variables to see if they are the values that you expect them to be. You can add print lines to see which path is being called in an if-else statement. You can add print line statements to see if a function is being called by just adding the print line inside the function. Print line functions can help you debug and understand how your code is working, and that allows you to identify the defect more easily. Similar techniques can be used in HTML, isolating the problem with comments. And instead of print line, we'll use alert statements, but for the same reasons, to check variables, check the path that the code is following. And also in HTML, you can use a debugger in the browser. For this class, we're going to use the Chrome debugger, but just in a limited capacity because there's quite a bit to learn about debuggers. We're going to focus on just reading the error messages that it gives you and checking what line number the error message refers to so that then we can go back and look at the code. Be a little careful with the error messages because sometimes they're not completely accurate. It might be that the error is occurring a couple lines before or a couple lines after. The error message may not always make sense. You still have to go interpret the code and actually determine the defect yourself.